what is Hashimoto's. In the front of your neck at the base of your throat, you have a little organ called the thyroid. The thyroid produces a hormone, which is like the ignition switch for every single cell in your body. Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition that your body is attacking that thyroid. Prior to my diagnosis, I thought I was just tired. Working full time in the ER, raising 4 boys, trying to homeschool them, in addition to working full time. Like there's so much on my plate, which is so common. Everybody is doing so many things, wearing so many hats. So I was like, everybody's tired. It might be common that we're tired, but it is not normal.
What's up, ladies? Welcome to the health class she deserves, the show where we ditch outdated women's health myths and talk real bodies, real cycles, and real stories. I am your host, Autumn Payon, and today's guest is Esther Yunkin, a registered nurse with over 25 years of experience in both emergency medicine and holistic health. After 17 years in the ER, Esther grew frustrated with the Band-Aid approach of conventional care. Now, she helps exhausted women with Hashimoto's regain their energy and feel like themselves again, without getting overwhelmed. She's the host of the Health with Hashimoto's podcast and the creator of the Holistic Hashimoto's program, where she shares simple, sustainable strategies for lasting wellness. Esther lives in rural Minnesota with her husband and their 4 boys, where they homeschool, garden, and raise a flock of chickens. Esther, welcome to class.
Hey, thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
We are excited to have you. I'd love to talk about how you got into this work because, like I mentioned in the intro, like you started in emergency medicine and then kind of moved to doing your own thing, and specifically with Hashimoto's. So what was the catalyst for all that?
I think it was a gradual getting frustrated with the broken medical system. In the ER, we're there for emergencies. And that makes your day. When you get to save somebody's life. I remember standing next to a bed and I had to push specific medications like every 2 minutes or he would die. And then, we got him up to dialysis to fix everything. But that's why you're there. You're there to save a life. What you're doing is saving a life in the next 5 minutes. But with our broken medical system, people are coming in for chronic things. They're coming back in. Like we have what we call frequent flyers, people who come in all the time, them by sight. And it just got so frustrated. And I quit pre-COVID. And so now it's even worse. I remember one specific patient, like I've always been holistic minded ever since I can remember. And then also trying to help people with prevention. And one specific person I remember, he was a dad, and he would bring his kids in for ear infections. And I recognized him, frequent flyer. He had a bunch of kids. And I was never shaming, never criticizing, but I could smell tobacco smoke on him. And so I would just do a quick education when I saw him, like, hey, did you know that cigarette smoking is one of the leading causes of ear infections? To give him agency in his kid's health, because obviously it's a problem, but never shaming. And I remember he came in once by himself and he's like, hey, you're that nurse. And I'm like, what do you, did I do something? He's like, I wanted to let you know I quit smoking. I quit smoking because of what you said. And that's not related at all to what I do right now with Hashimoto's, but it is related to every single person should have agency, and they should have the education to know that what they do does make a difference. And so that was one of the catalysts. Like, you know what I say really does impact not just my patient, but their family and their entire life going forward.
Yeah, I love that about agency and having control over your health. I think that the way we kind of are brought up in this medical system in the West is very, you don't have control. Like sickness is just something that happens to you. And look, with the world we've created, you can't avoid microplastics, like you can't avoid these forever chemicals and stuff completely. It's just impossible. And you'll drive yourself nuts trying to do it. But you still have some level of control over your immediate health. And obviously tragedies can happen and stuff, and that's not your fault. Like we never want to be like, it's your fault you have, XYZ disease. It's not my fault I have endometriosis, but there are things I can do to help manage that disease. And despite the lack of research we have on it, I still can I have that agency. I can, take control of my own health and see what works for me. So I think that's a really great perspective and something that I really try to preach on this podcast of yeah, some things are completely out of your control and don't go crazy trying to control them. But we know nobody's going to argue with you that smoking's bad for you, right? There's no
Right?
doctor in the world that's going to be like, yeah, do it. It's good for you. So, that's one of those things that is, I don't want to say easy because it's obviously an addiction, but it's one of those things where you have complete control over that. So I really, really like that perspective. So what was your journey to getting your Hashimoto's diagnosis then?
Yeah. So backing up a little bit, like what is Hashimoto's? So in the front of your neck at the base of your throat, you have a little organ called the thyroid. The thyroid produces a hormone, which is like the ignition switch for every single cell in your body. So if you want healthy cells, if you want active cells, if you want healthy tissues and organs, if you want abundant energy, you have to have a working thyroid. Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition that your body is attacking that thyroid. So prior to my diagnosis, I thought I was just tired, working full time in the ER, raising 4 boys, trying to homeschool them. In addition to working full time, like there's so much on my plate, which is so common. Everybody is doing so many things, wearing so many hats. So I was like, everybody's tired. But it shouldn't be normal, or it's not normal that you are like slurring your words because you're falling asleep while reading a book to your kids. Like, that's not normal. It might be common that we're tired, but it is not normal. It is not normal. It might be common, but it is not normal that a woman in their 30s needs a nap midday. That is not normal. Common, maybe, yes. Normal, no. And so it was things like that. Like, well, I'm just really tired. I can't stay awake. And then I started to get skin problems, almost like an eczema, but not eczema. And that is actually what drove me in to seek a diagnosis. I'm like, what is going on? And my chiropractor said, you know what, I think your thyroid, your neck looks boggy. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but whatever. So she said, let's test it. And while I was waiting for those labs to come back, I remember praying, like, God, it cannot be my thyroid. Like it could be anything else. God, somebody could stop me on the street and ask me about any medical condition, and I can tell you body, mind, spirit, diet, environment. Like I can tell you about basically any medical thing except thyroid. In nursing school, 4 years of nursing school, the thyroid confused me. There's too many numbers, too many teeter-totters, too many confusing things. When I went back to school for holistic health education, again, thyroid confused me. So as I'm praying and waiting for these labs, like, God, it cannot be my thyroid. And the labs came back, and it was. And I felt God telling me, Esther, with all of your experience, all of your education, all of your training, if you are confused by this, what do you think my average person is also feeling? Use this to help others. And so that is like the exact day when I decided I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make it simple, and I'm going to help others figure it out too.
That's amazing because you're so right. You're like you're like, I have much more education in this area than the average person. So if I'm confused by it, a lot of other people are going to be confused by it. And more women are affected by this than men, right? Like it's a lot more
Yes.
common for
Yep.
women, as is all autoimmune disease is a lot more common in women. And so, I think there's a social side of that as well, where things that commonly afflict women aren't given the same weight in it from any side, from the education side of things and like nursing school and med school and all that, and then also on the patient side of things. A lot of the symptoms that we often say people present with are based on the symptoms that men present with. So it's really interesting. And that's really amazing that you saw that instead of a discouraging moment where you were like, oh, crap, it's exactly what I didn't want it to be. You were like, well, that's not great, but here's an opportunity for me to do something with this and help a lot of other people. So that's really amazing. Is all hypothyroidism Hashimoto's, or is there like is there a line, a
This is
distinction?
a great question. It depends on who you ask. If you ask your typical doctor, first of all, a woman to get that diagnosis of hypothyroid, she is looking for that diagnosis. She's looking for answers for about 4 years. And she sees, on average, 4 different providers before she gets that diagnosis of hypothyroid. And a lot of doctors will just leave it at that because hypothyroid is when your thyroid is not producing enough thyroid hormone. But what the real question is why is my thyroid not producing enough hormone? And so a provider who just stops at your hypothyroid is doing a disservice to their patient because they're not going one step further and saying Hashimoto's is responsible for your hypothyroid. You have Hashimoto's. And if somebody doesn't know that they have an autoimmune condition, they don't know, again, going back to agency, they don't know that there are things that they can do. From the provider's perspective in this broken medical system, they say, you have hypothyroid, here's some Synthroid or levothyroxine. You're going to be on this for the rest of your life. Come back in a little while, we'll recheck your labs and we'll adjust your dose. End of story. And that is not okay. So
Mm-mm.
to answer your question, is hypothyroid Hashimoto's? About 90% is. There are some cases where it's not, but the majority of the time, it's just that the person diagnosed with hypothyroid doesn't know what's at the root of it.
So hypothyroidism is essentially just like not enough of the thyroid hormone, whereas Hashimoto's is because like there's not enough specifically because the body's attacking itself, right? Is that a
Yes.
correct? Okay,
Yep. Yeah. So
awesome.
Hashimoto's is the attack on the thyroid.
Mm,
Hypothyroid is the result of the attack.
right. Okay, awesome. That's it. Yeah, that's a very clear way to explain it. So I loved what you were saying about like common but not normal. Say that all the time, especially with cyclical issues and all these things that we kind of just say, oh, women are just meant to deal with that. The pain of being a woman, womanhood equals pain. That's so not true. And it's that whole idea of this is a super common thing, but it is not normal. It's common because we've been neglecting women's health for so long. So you talked about that extreme fatigue, like next level fatigue, skin issues. What are some other symptoms of Hashimoto's that women could maybe be on the lookout for?
Because the thyroid produces the key to turn on the cell, then you think hypothyroid or Hashimoto's is not giving you enough keys. So your cells are not turning on. So things are slowing down. So generally, slowing down in any system can be related to your thyroid. So in the brain, slowing down is going to look like depression. In fact, it is standard of care. It doesn't always happen, but it is standard of care that if someone has a complaint of depression, their thyroid needs to be checked because it is the number one cause of depression. If somebody doesn't check the thyroid and they just say, oh, here's some, SSRI antidepressant medications, if you're not addressing the thyroid, the other medications aren't helping if the thyroid is responsible. So that slowing down in the brain is depression. Slowing down in the gut would be constipation and other gut problems. Constipation is very common in hypothyroid. Slowing down of your hair, skin, and nails. People actually, it's one of the main things that drives women in because they're like, fatigue, common. Brain fog, common. Losing my hair, I'm not okay with this. I need to find out
Mm,
why. So
mm.
when women have, or men, thinning hair, their eyebrows, especially the outer third of the eyebrows, classic hypothyroid symptom. Skin and nails, like nails get brittle. Again, these are things that are slowing down. And of course, fatigue is your energy slowing down. Again, going back to the brain fog, slowing down. So if you think of the cells needing that key to turn on and then go to your symptom, like, is this because my cells don't have enough energy? It could be your thyroid.
So, okay, that's like a great way to think about it. I had no idea that it was standard of care to check the thyroid with depression. Like, I just have never heard that before, but it makes perfect sense that that would be something that needs to be checked. But here's the other thing is we go the other way with women's health where we say she's coming in with all of these very tangible physical symptoms. She must have anxiety. Here's an SSRI. And it's like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I have anxiety because I'm dealing with this hair loss and pain and whatever it is. Not the other way. I mean, of course it can be the other way around, but when women come in specifically, we automatically are jumping to these psychological conclusions as opposed to physical ones. And more often than not, it is a, very intimate connection between physical and mental symptoms, right? So it's really interesting that it's like if you come in with depression, you're supposed to check for this very physical thing. But we're so busy going the other direction for women. It doesn't surprise me at all that we wouldn't just be like, "Oh, she thinks she's depressed. Yep, she's depressed. We'll just send her on her way." Um,
Right.
that's so interesting. I'm glad I know that now. Yeah, that's what. And anyone listening who's maybe like, "Oh, maybe I should just get my thyroid checked just in case." Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I had no idea. And I'd been in the ER and, through nursing school and everything, I'd been 17 years before
Hmm.
I learned this. And I learned it because I had to dig into hypothyroid and Hashimoto's, but it was never taught to me.
Yeah.
It should be common knowledge because depression is such a huge topic. And you also mentioned anxiety, and I want to touch on that. When your thyroid is being attacked by your immune system and it's being broken down, when like let's just picture, something comes in and takes a chunk of your thyroid and then it releases it into the bloodstream, right? So all of a sudden, you have a sudden flood of hormone, of the thyroid hormone instead of a depletion. So you can have, when you have Hashimoto's, you can have both hypo and hyper symptoms, which of course is even more confusing because the doctor is like, yeah, I don't know what's going on with you. It's probably just all in your head. Because
Hmm.
you're coming with, okay, here are some hypo symptoms, here are some hyper symptoms. I don't know what's going on, doctor. And he or she is like, yeah, I don't either. It's probably just in your head.
Hmm.
No.
Hmm. Love that. Love that response. Nobody can just say, I don't know. Like, you just automatically have to say that a woman's making it up instead of being like, I don't know. Let's see what else we can do to fix this. I'm curious because you said there's like an average of 4 years and four different providers that women usually have to go through. Is that something that you had to deal with when getting your diagnosis? Or because I know you mentioned a chiropractor and they tend to be a little more like forward with this kind of thinking. So were you able to kind of escape that like 4 year wait for a diagnosis, or did you also run into that problem?
I am an abnormal patient. And it's because I worked in the ER and you have people in the back, nurses in the back, and they take care of all the patients who come in. And then once you've been in the ER for a while, you graduate to triage, which is, taking care of everybody who comes in and you figure out who is the most critical. But at triage, you're also trained to basically think like a doctor. Like, what is my doctor in the back going to need? And you start ordering all of these tests. And yes, you have protocols and everything, but you really get to know like what labs to order, what CAT scans to order. And you're always under a doctor. Like, I'm not acting like a doctor. But because I was trained in that, I'm really, really a bad patient. I order my own labs. I go online. There's several different sites where you can order your own labs unless you live in a couple different states. So I so no, to answer your question, I did not seek answers for 4 years. I tried a lot of things. If I didn't have so much autonomy and be able to order everything myself and, dig into the research, I probably would have been searching and gone to multiple different people.
Hmm. Yeah, I love how your background is in the ER and such like in the Western model, and then also just like such a fast-paced, high-stress environment. I think that gives you such an interesting perspective as well, like now that you do this more holistic side of things. And so that is really interesting. Like you're just going and ordering your own tests and stuff. You're like half patient, half provider. Which
Right.
probably empowered you a lot as well, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
now I
yeah.
teach other people how to order their own because it's all about education. If you know what you're
Mhm.
looking for, you might know more about the thyroid and the different labs than an average provider because it's confusing. like I said in my story at the beginning, thyroid stuff is very confusing. And there's, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 different labs that doctors are picking from. Like, I even remember when I went to see my chiropractor that one time, she's like, oh, I don't know which of these to order. Let me call. And so she was calling back to the lab, like, which ones should I order? What panel? It's very confusing. So being able to take agency and learn to do that for yourself, it's something I want all of my listeners to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And why is it so confusing? Is there just a lack of, like, have we not studied it well enough? Is there a lack of understanding, or is the system itself just so complicated for like the average person to understand?
All three.
Okay.
The thyroid is confusing, and there's multiple different labs. So the thyroid produces a hormone called T4. And so, for example, when you're looking at the labs to order, you could order a T4 complete. You could order a T4, a free T4. You could order a T4, T3 ratio. Like, there's so many things. If you just search for T4 and all, like, 6 different labs come up, you'll be like, what is, I don't know what to do. So the thyroid itself is confusing. The labs are confusing. And as far as education and research, there's not enough done. Part of that is due to the broken medical system. I read a very interesting book. I don't have it right next to me. It's called Rethinking Hypothyroidism. It was published, I want to say, within the last 5 years. And he goes into basically synthroid and how they captured the doctors and the labs and the pharmaceutical stuff. There's a lot of money in that, and they sabotaged, like, in my recap of the book, the synthroid lobby sabotaged other options. And so it's a lot of brokenness. It's the pharmaceuticals then going to the doctors and saying the only thing that matters is TSH. The only thing that matters is Synthroid. So check a TSH and put somebody on Synthroid. Well, TSH is one of the labs, but it is not the most important. It is a lab actually not of the thyroid at all. It's a test to see how much is your brain asking your thyroid to produce more. It's not related at all to what's coming out of the thyroid. So yeah, to answer your question, there's a lot of layers in this.
And Synthroid is a pharmaceutical, right? Just to clarify.
Yes. Yep. Synthroid is brand name levothyroxine. Levothyroxine is one of the most common medications prescribed in the US. I think it's in the top 3.
Wow. Oh my God, the corruption.
Right?
It's like, you're not even surprised anymore, but it's still very disheartening and saddening that people care more about their pockets than just true wellness and humanity. It's quite depressing, but I'll have to look into that book. You said it's called Rethinking Hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Yep.
I'll put that in the show notes too, in case other people are interested. I'm curious if you this might be too like individualistic to answer as a more general question, so just let me know. But I'm curious if you have any tips on like language in terms of speaking with your doctor. If there's somebody listening who is like, well, maybe this is a route I should go down. I'm relating to some of these symptoms. Do you have any tips on speaking with a provider about this and advocating for yourself and saying, I want X, Y, and Z tests? Because like you said, there's so many, so maybe that's too individual, but.
No, absolutely. I do. In fact, so many people were asking for that. I created a PDF and it's 10 questions to ask your provider. It's free. I can give you the link so you can put it in the show notes for the listeners.
Yeah.
And so it's 2 parts. One is like 1-page printable sheet with all 10 questions. So you can just bring that in and then you can write your notes in that. And that's for you to ask the doctor. But the rest of the PDF is teaching you why that question is important and what it means for your health. So one of the first questions is, what is my diagnosis? Because like I said, a lot of doctors might say you have hypothyroidism, but they won't say you have Hashimoto's. And so you want to know exactly what they know. Is it hypothyroidism, or do they already know that you have Hashimoto's? So getting a diagnosis is obviously step 1. but it's something that is skipped. Like some people, some providers, they'll be like, okay, your thyroid labs were wrong. Here's a prescription for Synthroid. They skipped over the name of the diagnosis. So now the patient doesn't know what's going on and how to react. I believe it's the second question is, why do you think I have this? And most doctors are not going to be able to answer that. And again, the humility and ability to say, I don't know, is crucial. And I don't say this in the PDF, but their answer right there might tell you this is an indication that we need to get a new provider. If they just say, a lot of women get it. We don't know. It's very common. Here's a prescription. There's your indication that you need to switch to a provider who's going to help you figure out what's going on. But like I said, in that PDF, it's 10 different questions. I did run some of these by a functional medicine provider, and he said, that why question, it might have turned me off before he switched to functional medicine. He said that is a question that does take humility to hear and to answer honestly.
Absolutely. And I see that so much in the endometriosis space because there is a crazy amount of misinformation out there about endometriosis, and the doctors themselves are just not educated. I know people going through like nursing programs or whatever, and they'll send me things from their textbooks or on exams or whatever that's just straight up misinformation about endometriosis. And it's such a tiny little, women's health in general is such a tiny little part of any medical education. And so it is such like it's just systemic from the root, and there's like this very tiny class of doctors that is qualified to give advice and to treat endo, but there's this much larger group of doctors who are still pretending that they are. And so that humility in a provider is necessary, and it's not something that we see super often, that ability to say, I'm not really sure, or this is out of my league, I think I need to refer you out. So I love that. I absolutely will be linking that for everybody below, that PDF. So if you are, relating to any of this or interested, please check that out in the show notes. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the 3 Ps that you mentioned in our pre-chat. Can you just expand on that for everybody?
Yeah, the 3 Ps are the 3 most common times of a woman's life where she will develop Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism. And so in order of age span, it is puberty, and then pregnancy, and then perimenopause. And when you're talking to people, it's interesting to say, I have a thyroid problem, because all of a sudden a lot of people will be like, oh, me too. But they don't talk about it unless you bring it up. I did not know that Hashimoto's ran in my family until I posted it on Facebook. And then all of a sudden I'm getting great aunts oh yeah, everybody in our family has that. I'm like, what?
Oh
What? On both sides of my family. Why did you never tell me this? And in the ER too, when I was, triaging a patient, do you have any medical problems? No. Do you take any medication? I take levothyroxine. Oh, so you have a thyroid problem? Oh, yeah, I guess. They don't think about it. But when you ask deeper, especially the women, when were you diagnosed? It'll come back to those 3 Ps. Oh yeah, I was diagnosed when I was an early teenager, when they were hitting puberty and the estrogen levels were changing. There's a huge estrogen link with, a lot of issues, especially autoimmune. And then in pregnancy, a lot of women are diagnosed. Thyroid problems in pregnancy cause a lot of miscarriages, and they can greatly impact the baby. If your thyroid is not producing enough hormone, it decreases your child's intelligence, their IQ has testable drops. Back before they figured this out, I want to say 200 years ago, there was a name for babies who were born to women with hypothyroid, and it was cretin. And I've heard the word just as an insult.
Yeah.
I think of it like a big, stupid meanie. If I hear that term, but it came from a medical term for babies who were born to women with hypothyroid, and it was low IQ. And then and also important in pregnancy, yes, they're developing Hashimoto's or hypothyroid, but also you need more thyroid hormone when you're pregnant, because of the baby, of the baby's needs.
Mm,
And then in perimenopause, again, we're having a lot of hormone changes, and that is the third time in a woman's life when they are more apt to develop thyroid problems.
that makes a lot of sense just because hormones are, I feel like we just throw the word hormones around just for fun these days, but they literally make you who you are. Like, and there's no such thing as like targeted hormone treatment. Whenever you have either natural hormone changes or you're using a hormonal intervention, like it's affecting every single thing in your body. And it's important to be aware of that to make empowered decisions. So
Yes.
that makes a lot of sense that those times would trigger hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's or other things, I'm sure. I'm sure there's a lot of other disease links, but we just, we don't tend to, from a research standpoint, we don't tend to look at things in that context very often of like, what's happening in a woman's body specifically that is triggering these things. So that's very interesting. I'd love to move into more of like either treatment or prevention side of things. What is their treatment other than, some pharmaceuticals that you have mentioned? And in terms of prevention, is there anything that people can be doing to make sure that they don't develop Hashimoto's?
Oh, those are good questions. So let's go treatment first. If your thyroid is not producing enough thyroid hormone, you need that thyroid hormone. Your cells need that little ignition key to turn on. Accepting a prescription is not failure. I know a lot of people have the thought of, if I'm on a pharmaceutical medication, I've done something wrong and I want to get off of it as soon as I can. Well, it's fine to not want to be on a pharmaceutical. It's fine that we have recognized the corruption in the pharmaceutical industry, but you have to do what your cells need, and they need that ignition key. If your thyroid is not producing enough hormone, it's fine to ask for help and to get that pharmaceutical prescription. Now, there are natural thyroid, and a lot of that comes from, back 150, 200 years ago when they figured this out. They would actually take, I believe it's pig and cow thyroids, and they like dry them and encapsulate them, and people take natural desiccated thyroid. The pharmaceutical industry earlier this year started to go after that. Natural desiccated thyroid was put on the market before, I believe, before the FDA was formed. And so they didn't go through all of the processes. They just like, okay, this is natural desiccated thyroid. This much works for my patient. The outcomes were amazing. Like, that's how it used to work.
Hmm.
And so going through regulations and things right now, the pharmaceutical industry is trying to take out natural desiccated thyroid. And so there is a fight. As of right now, when we're recording, natural desiccated thyroid will be unavailable in sometime in 2026. And patients and providers are freaking out because there's about 10 to 20% of women where the pharmaceutical stuff does not work for their symptoms. They've tried it and it does not work. They use natural desiccated thyroid, and that is what works for their symptoms. It's the only thing that turns off their brain fog. It's the only thing that gives them back their energy. And so, yes, there is a fight. So that is the treatment. You have to have enough of those keys to turn on your cells. Before I move on to the next part of your question, do you have any questions about that part?
I mean, not questions, but that's just insane. Like the greed is disgusting. I just can't even, because, these huge worth billions of dollars, these companies worth so much freaking money are like, I want more money. So let me take away the only treat, even if it wasn't the only treatment, even if the pharmaceuticals were working and somebody wanted the natural desiccated, they didn't want something made in a lab. That's a perfectly reasonable desire. And you're just going to take that away so that you can have a monopoly on. I thought monopolies were illegal. So riddle me
Right?
that, America. Okay, I'm sorry. You can go on.
All right. So that is the treatment for your thyroid not producing enough keys. And then you go a step further. You're like, how can I help my thyroid produce more keys? How can I help my thyroid heal? Now, when you're in anything that's not pharmaceutical, the FDA and what's the advertising one? FDA and FTC.
Mm.
You are not allowed to say heal or diagnose or treat. Like nothing natural legally can do any of those three. So obviously, I'm not telling you how to treat or heal or diagnose. I'm educating people in how to help their bodies work better. And so when you are doing the work of trying to heal your thyroid and trying to address this autoimmune problem, you have to figure out what's at the root. So obviously, Hashimoto's, this autoimmune problem, is at the root of hypothyroid most of the time, 90% of the cases. So what is at the root of the autoimmune condition? How can I help my body, my immune system, not attack itself? How can I also help my thyroid produce more energy? And let's do the thyroid first. There are 2 different products, and I use them every single day. One of them helps your body fight antioxidants, fight oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is like the rusting on a car or the browning of a banana. It happens on a cellular level. And so we want to clean that up. Because when our cells are rusty, they're not working well. So even if I have all the keys in the world, if my cells aren't working well, then the keys don't matter. So I'm trying to clean up that oxidative damage. And then also I'm working with my mitochondria, again with a natural product that I use every day, to help my mitochondria make more, again, energy. And then the energy, the mitochondria need the keys. So all of these things go together. In my opinion, you have to work on cellular health at the entire body level, not just the thyroid, not just the immune system. So let's work on cleaning up any damage. And that's, you don't have to take the products that I take every day. You can work on cleaning up your diet, making sure that you're getting enough antioxidants in your diet, making sure that you're eating broccoli sprouts or things that have sulforaphane, which helps your body clean up oxidative stress. So there are natural things you can do too. And then in creating more mitochondria, some people really like red light therapy. What is one reason? It's because it helps your mitochondria produce more energy, more ATP. So that's how I help my thyroid work better. And then we also look at the attack. We want to help our thyroid do better, but we also want to stop the attack. And so when it comes to autoimmune conditions, everybody with any autoimmune condition has 3 different components. And that is a genetic component. You cannot change your genes. You can't change where you came from. You can't go and, change your ancestry, but you can change how those genes are expressed. You can do that through what you eat and through herbs. There's a lot of different things that people are learning about right now, and it's so fascinating. Nutrigenomics is one. Like if you just want to Google that, nutrigenomics, and you're going to go down some rabbit trails that are very fascinating. And so everybody has a genetic component. Everybody also has a gut component with any autoimmune condition. So you want to look at your gut. Number 1 question, am I pooping at least once a day? And is that poop easy to pass? And do I feel like I'm fully evacuating? If the answers to those are no, then you have work to do. But if you have an autoimmune condition in general, you know that there's some gut healing to do. So first, let's get you pooping every day. So you have a genetic component, a gut component, and then there's also 1 or more triggers. And we can work on those. Biggest trigger that I see, I have 8 common ones that I talk about, but one of them is stress. And you can't change the people around you. You can't change, when I say you can't, yes, you can choose to associate with different people. And if your job stresses you out, maybe you can get a different job. If it's an income problem, I'm not saying that these are unchangeable, but today, can you change those? Maybe not, but you can change how you react to them. So if you feel like you're in a high stress, if you feel yourself working up, if you feel your shoulders going up and your jaw tightening, you take a deep breath and relax your jaw, relax your tongue, relax your shoulders. Breathe from your diaphragm. That's kind of stuff I'm talking about. You don't have to upend your entire life because that's stressful in and of itself. But can you change how you react to that to lower how your body is processing stress?
I think just even if you just set a reminder on your phone, that simple act of every hour or so throughout the day, just having a check of am I clenching? Because sometimes I do that when I'm driving a lot. Oh my God, because I get stressed out when I'm driving. And all of a sudden I'll realize that my fingers hurt because I'm gripping the steering wheel so hard. And I'm I need to chill. And like you said, the shoulders. And so even just that simple change, and I, would also throw in there maybe going on social media less often can really, make a huge difference in people's lives when it comes to that stress trigger.
Absolutely. I used to have one of those micro habits triggers. And when I had kids in car seats, getting all of the kids in shoes and coats and out
Mm-hmm.
the door and in the vehicle and buckled in, by the time I sat down in the driver's seat, I was already so stressed. And so
Mm-hmm.
my micro habit was when I buckled my own seatbelt, that was my trigger to relax my jaw, relax my tongue, relax my shoulders, and take a deep breath. And I needed
Yes.
it every single time I needed it. It was so
I love
helpful.
that. Yeah, because then, well, once you get them all buckled in, somebody has to pee, and it's like,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea, though. I'm probably gonna think of that now every time I buckle my seatbelt. I'm gonna be like, okay, I need to calm down. In terms of the gut component, I'm curious if you have ever done the autoimmune protocol diet, if you like that, or recommend that to clients that you're working with. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So the AIP diet, autoimmune diet, it is highly recommended and widely recommended, and for good reason, because a lot of people have good results on it. I have a background with disordered eating, and I find that whenever I try to have a very legalistic diet, it really screws with my brain and
Mm,
I have a hard time eating. So when my youngest kid, who is almost 12, when he was a baby, he had head to toe eczema, and I had to do a full elimination diet. And it was like 2 or 3 months. The only things I could eat were vegetables and fish and chicken. I think it was horrible. And it was very hard. I would never do it for me. I did it for my child because daily he was, screaming in pain, scratching himself bloody. I don't know how that would have changed my experience had I not done that elimination diet for him. Because in doing it, I did figure out some things. I figured out that I can't have gluten. If I have gluten, it increases my migraines, it like lowers that threshold. It increases brain fog. So some things that are Hashimoto's related. So I can't say for myself how I would have how I would have reacted had I never done an elimination diet. But for the women in my program and on my podcast, I don't have like a blanket statement of do this diet because I understand that everybody has their own background. And so for women like me who have a background in disordered eating, I don't want to trigger something. I want to empower you to say, you know your background. You also know what you're capable of. Like, do you have the bandwidth, the time bandwidth, the emotional bandwidth to upend your diet to change everything? Or do you need to just take it one category at a time? Like, let's start with gluten. Gluten has been shown that 80% of people with autoimmune thyroid problems, they will react better when they're off gluten. So if you want to go all out and you have the emotional, mental, and time bandwidth for that, awesome. Try the AIP diet for like 2 to 3 months. If you know that you're just going to stop eating because you're trying to implement this, then go slower and maybe just do gluten or maybe just cut out processed food for a while. Like you have to know what works for you and your lifestyle and your brain, and then go from there.
yeah, I think that's really great advice. And I also recently cut out gluten leading up to my surgery for endometriosis, and then afterwards just kind of stuck with it because I had heard so many people benefited from it specifically for endo. It cut down a lot of inflammation, and I was just hearing a lot about it, and I was like, I really didn't want to, but finally I was like, okay. And a way that I started slow, I didn't do it completely cold turkey. I think I've talked about this before on the podcast, but for anyone listening who is cycling, who is maybe wanting to try cutting out gluten or dairy or whatever, I started doing it in my luteal phase. And so I take my temperature every morning so I know when I ovulate. And on that day, I would go gluten free essentially for the 2 weeks then leading up to my period. And then I would be like a little less strict about it before ovulation. And I just kind of started doing that and I noticed a difference. And that's why it got the dopamine going, I feel like, where I was like, okay, this sucks. I don't like having to do this. It's crazy expensive. Not really enjoying it. However, I'll do anything to get rid of this pain. So if it's decreasing the inflammation and it's helping me like live a less painful life, like I got the reward system going. And that's kind of how I ended up getting a lot more, strict about being gluten free. But like you say, with the disordered eating, I also have a background of just not the healthiest eating patterns. And I think that loosening up on other things. So I used to be so strict about, and I am still pretty strict about like processed foods and the things that I keep in my house. But if I'm out to eat or something and, I can't have XYZ because of the gluten, or I don't want to drink alcohol because I know it's going to cause a flare, I'll get like a soda or something, which never, ever in a million years would I ever have done before. Like, soda is just so bad. It's so bad with so much sugar, so many chemicals in there. Like, it's just not good for you. But it's one of those things where I was like, I need a fun drink. And I know that this is because I know myself and I know my triggers. I know that alcohol is going to cause a lot more problems than a Coke. And so
Right.
I'm going to drink a Coke. And so that's kind of how I do like a more slower, more trauma friendly approach to, I don't even want to say like dieting, but dieting for chronic illness, I guess, more of a necessity dieting to help decrease my inflammation. And also the 80-20 rule I really like, of like, okay, if 20% of your time you're like a little bit less strict with the quote unquote rules, and then the other 80% of the time you're doing your absolute best to decrease inflammation, that 80% is going to be what informs your life. And there's no reason to stress yourself out and freak out over that 20. So I really like that perspective. So yeah, that's really amazing. I'd love to ask if you have any advice for listeners, just more general advice for anyone who has just been diagnosed with Hashimoto's or is listening and maybe thinking that this is a route that they need to explore. Anything that we haven't covered yet that you just want to kind of send as a message to anyone in that boat?
I think always asking why. Being a toddler, why,
Why?
why? You have hypothyroid. Why? You have, you have it because you have an autoimmune condition. Why? You have an autoimmune condition because of something, in your gut. Why? Maybe it's because you're eating gluten. Maybe it's because you're eating a lot of processed foods. Why? Because it's easy. Like, always asking why. And that's going to eventually lead you to, what can I do today? And I always want to leave people with simple things and sustainable things. You have to ask why, and you have to ask it multiple times in order to figure out what you can do that is both simple and sustainable. If it's not simple, you're not going to do it. Let's be honest. We have the best intentions, but if it is not simple, if you can't make it simple, you're not going to do it generally. And if it's not sustainable, you're not going to keep doing it. So then you just wasted your time. I think of people who do 75 hard, more power to them if they can do it. That is not simple nor sustainable. And most of the people who start 75 hard fail very early on. So let's pick simple and sustainable things because your health matters and your long-term health matters. We want to rack up the wins. We don't want to have days full of failure. So pick simple and sustainable things that you can win at, because then you're going to win with your health.
That's definitely great advice, because you're training your brain then to, like you said, you don't want days full of failure. It's discouraging. You're going to be like, this is stupid. It doesn't matter. At least in my personality, I know I'm going to be like, this is dumb. I'm going back to the way I was. And that's that. But yeah, building up that dopamine and training your brain is definitely great advice. And I also, the why thing reminded me of something I heard a while ago as well, of doing that with your goals as well. Just asking why at least 5 times and saying, okay, I want to be healthier. Why? So I can spend more time with my family. Why? Like, and just, really getting to the root of what you truly want out of life. So I love that. Be a toddler. Just ask why to everybody. Well, this has been a truly amazing and informative episode. I do have one question that I like to ask everyone at the end, and you can kind of take this in any direction that you would like. if you could rewrite the health class curriculum that every woman deserves, what would your first lesson be?
Men and women are not the same. Like, number one, you have to know that. And when you're in junior high, you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about, yeah, why is my body changing? But you're not thinking being a female is a superpower. And knowing my hormones and the cyclical, nature of being a woman is a superpower. Instead, we're taught, ew, you're going to get your period. Gross. Ew. So many things to shame being a female instead of saying, you are created with this amazing body. And the more you can learn about yourself and about being a woman, the better you will be in your entire life. It's going to impact your health. It's going to impact your productivity. It's going to impact how you feel about yourself and the people around you. I feel like that I would rewrite on day one.
Mm. I love that. It's a superpower. You're so right. There's just this stigma stamped on it in the very beginning where it's like, yeah, your period, and that's all you get. You don't say, like, it's not like, oh, you're going to cycle. It's like, you're going to bleed once a month and it's going
Right?
to suck and you're going to have to hide it because the entire world thinks that it's gross and that you're gross. And obviously we have all of this pain and just like horrible issues associated with our cycles because we're internalizing all of this. So if we were like from day one, like, hey, this is going to happen. It's a month-long process. It's not just this 1 week. And it's actually, you know, like your biochemistry is superior to a man's.
Right.
And that's, that's my opinion. But
Right.
I think
And
that,
and teaching teenagers how to harness that luteal phase
yes,
and how to how to plan their weekly or their monthly projects at school. My kids go to a
yes.
school where they have projects. Well, let's teach the girls how to set up their projects so that they're harnessing their hormones and, doing just the mundane things on that week where you just want to do the mundane and doing your creative thinking when your hormones are helping you excel at that. Like, yes, being a woman, it's a superpower.
It really is. Yeah, and I love that example too because it goes so far beyond, just your diet and exercise. I think when people think of cycle syncing or cyclical living, they're immediately like, "Oh, I have to eat broccoli this week and I have to eat chicken this week and I have to, run on this week, but I can't run on this." So it's like, no, 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 just observe your body, see what works for you. But it goes so far beyond. It's more of like a brain, I think starting with the brain and what your brain is doing because of the hormonal changes is a much better way to look at it. And so, yeah, I think if I knew that in high school doing projects and stuff, I think life would have been a whole lot easier for me. So that's an amazing lesson. Thank you so much for being here. I think that everyone is going to get so much out of this episode today and learn a lot about Hashimoto's, which is such an I don't think most people have heard of it, but not a lot of people could tell you what it was. I'm really excited for everyone to listen to this. Make sure you guys all check out the show notes. I'll link all of Esther's things so you can go and find her and the book and the PDF that we talked about. Make sure you check those out. Thank you guys so much for listening. Class dismissed.